Now, we all have a challenge or opportunity we need to move forward on, but more often than not, as people and as organizations, we cling to these old ways of thinking and operating that prevent thoughtful risk-taking and keep us trapped in the way things are.
We all eventually realize that even our most monumental successes can only deliver us temporary excellence. Because as time passes, our customers, our clients, communities, the world changes. So the things that once helped us stand out start to look kind of ordinary.
Most leaders treat innovation kind of like a fire extinguisher instead of using it to fireproof the house. And as long as you work like this, the things that once helped us deliver excellence and stand out could be the reasons we end up going obsolete.
So the question is, when it comes to the opportunities and the challenges we face in our work and our personal lives, how do we take the stories we've been writing over and over and find a way to turn the page? Now, I spent around a decade in Silicon Valley between Google and Stanford, but I also spent that time as a poet. And now, straddling those worlds, I learned two things. First, even the most capable minds get stuck on the status quo in their work, their business challenges, or just in how they see their own potential as leaders and people. But the second thing I learned is this. For thousands of years, the work of the poet has been to take the world we walk through on autopilot every single day and find ways to reinvent it.
Like, the only reason poetry has survived for thousands of years is because every single day, poets like Robert wake up, whether they're succeeding or struggling, and they ask themselves what one thing is they can do with their craft today that they didn't do with it yesterday.
Writer's block almost never comes from a lack of ideas, but a fear that the ideas we do have won't succeed. If you've ever considered picking up a new hobby, giving honest feedback to someone on your team, or championing a change in process to your stakeholders, but didn't because you worried about what would happen if it went wrong or you screwed up, you've experienced writer's block in its purest form. When our goals shift from excellence to exploration, we often end up finding both. You see, most leaders wait until things break to innovate on them. But by asking you to start looking at your work the way a poet might, I'm asking you to take the risk of innovating on parts of your craft while they're still working.
Turn the Page is an evidence-based framework for innovative thinking to help leaders unlock breakthrough business and personal growth. It's a collection of principles poets have relied on for millennia to relentlessly push their art forward. Write by erasing, think inside the box, aim for the trash can, give reality the benefit of the doubt, wreck your rhythm, and seek your weakness.
What if creativity isn't just about doing more things faster and better? What if creativity is about creating space in between the work you were already doing? Space that makes room for a new idea, a new perspective, or a new solution to your challenges. Like, Quest, what can you write by erasing? What's one thing you've held on to for so long in your work, you've forgotten to ask yourself if you might be able to move forward without it? I want you all experimenting with ideas so often and so fast, you're tossing them out just as fast as you come up with them, because the pile of trash you're accumulating will be the place you find the line you can nurture into your next masterpiece.
When we apply these principles to the way we work and lead, we not only uncover the wellspring of possibility we miss in our daily routines, we make those possibilities inevitable.
I'm so grateful to get to be here to share with you a few tools that I believe are going to unlock new possibilities for all of you in your crafts as architects of organizational resilience. But before we get there, let's take a step back. We've come here from all over the place, right? We represent unique industries and organizations with their own challenges, but there were two things every single person in this audience in particular has in common. The first is that we are all wondering what a poet is doing speaking to so many people who have jobs. And fair enough, so I promise we're going to get to that. But the second thing we have in common is that we're all here in pursuit of excellence for our organizations. Now, whether we're healthcare leaders who measure that excellence through patient outcomes and operational efficiency, or we're manufacturers who measure it through low defect rates and cycle times, we're all here because we want to build organizations that are fit to weather any storm, which raises the question, now that we are here together, what's the best way for us to nurture that spirit of excellence? Well, here's where the poetry thing comes back in. I want to tell you a quick story. So years ago, a young man named Robert was making his living as a full-time poet. He's living the artist's lifestyle, the bohemian dream, which in the poetry community is a phrase we use to say he was broke. And so Robert wants to earn a little extra cash, and one day he's reading a magazine. He sees an ad that says, "Submissions wanted, we'll pay for poems." And Robert thinks, this is my chance to make a little bit of cash. And so Robert writes this gorgeous poem on a piece of paper, licks and seals it in an envelope, sends it off to the papers in New York City, and he waits. And a few months later, he receives the greatest news of his life. The poem he'd written had been selected to be published in the New York Independent magazine, meaning that he was about to walk away with the life-changing sum of $15. Which is a lot of money to most poets today, so imagine what this felt like back in 1894. Folks, this meant Robert was rich, and so he throws aside his pen and paper. He picks up his earnings and starts spending like nobody's business. He's eating well, drinking good, not writing at all, until one day he notices his small fortune is running a little thin. So he says, no problem, I think I can do this again. And so he reverse engineers his last success, writes another poem in the exact same style, sends it off to the papers, and he gets his poem published, but this time he gets a few rejections first. He says, that's strange, I mean, this is a damn good poem. But no matter, once again, he throws aside his pen and paper, he picks up his earnings, starts spending like nobody's business, he's eating well, drinking good, not writing at all, until once again, his small fortune is running a little thin. So you know where this is about to go. He writes another poem with the same style, sends it off, but this time, he gets a whole pile of rejections. And this time, nobody wants to publish Robert's poem. And Robert's left to wonder how it could be that a style that so recently served him so well no longer does. So as you may be starting to guess, this is a story about poetry that's not really about poetry, right? We all eventually realize that even our most monumental success can only deliver us temporary excellence, because as time passes, our users, our customers, our industry, the world changes. So the things that once helped us stand out and deliver excellence start to look kind of ordinary. But as human beings, we get so wrapped up in past success that often we turn to the same tactics over and over. Just like Robert, we write the same poem again and again until one day they fail us. And when they do, we kind of panic, right? We search for another creative stunts we can pull to give ourselves a hit at that feeling of excellence, not realizing that if we only make those innovations when we're standing on the back foot, we're walking back into the same trap all of us want to escape. See, I'll put it like this. Most leaders treat innovation kind of like a fire extinguisher instead of using it to fireproof the house. And as long as you work like this, the things that once helped us deliver excellence and stand out could be the reasons we end up going obsolete. Well, the good news is, I don't think it has to go down like this. You see, for Robert, rejection was the perfect reason for him to find new reasons to play with his craft. And so he stops writing for money, and he starts just writing. He writes every day with no other goal than to experiment with the outer boundaries of his art. He writes beautiful poems and boring poems. He writes wonderful and weird poems, poems with rich metaphors, and poems you might be embarrassed to read in a second grade classroom. But quality didn't matter, because as Robert was about to discover, when our goals shift from excellence to exploration, we often end up finding both. You see, pretty soon, all of Robert's work began to improve. Soon his worst poems today are better than his best poems from 5 years ago. Soon he has poems in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, the Yale Review, and before the world knew what had hit them, Robert Frost had become the poet that we still read and teach today. For those of you with a life, that's the guy who wrote the poem about the road less traveled. The man who's written such unforgettable lines like, what but design of darkness to appall, if design governed in a thing so small. And if you don't understand what these words mean, that's how you know it's great poetry. I'm kidding. Robert Frost is dope, to be very clear. Once again, this is a story about poetry that's not really about poetry. See, for years, I worked at Google by day, and I wrote poems by night. And I know those worlds sound a universe apart, but here's the thing. Working in Silicon Valley as an artist showed me that for poets and professionals, the need we have to consistently reinvent our craft is literally existential. Like, the only reason poetry has survived for thousands of years is because every single day, poets like Robert wake up, whether they're succeeding or struggling, and they ask themselves what one thing is they can do with their craft today that they didn't do with it yesterday. And I believe that attitude of proactive exploration will enable us to take this moment of excellence and turn it into momentum of excellence. You know, I was invited here to talk about creativity and innovation, right? But what if creativity isn't just about doing more things faster and better? What if creativity is about creating space in between the work you were already doing? Space that makes room for a new idea, a new perspective, or a new solution to your challenges. Like, Quest, what can you write by erasing? What's one thing you've held on to for so long in your work, you've forgotten to ask yourself if you might be able to move forward without it? I don't care if it's a strategic planning matrix, your technology stack, your org structure. There's something in your organization that served it at some point, but that will eventually hold it back if you don't consider letting it go.
Who in this room has heard the phrase writer's block before? Okay, just gauge and make sure we got some good high school English trauma in the room. Excellent. For those of you who aren't familiar with this phrase, writer's block is what happens when a poet or a writer sits down at their desk and for whatever reason they just can't get their ideas out onto the page, right? It's what happens when the writer feels blocked. Seems simple enough, right? But here's what most people misunderstand about writer's block. Writer's block almost never comes from a lack of ideas, but a fear that the ideas we do have won't succeed. And spoiler alert, that's a condition that's not specific to writers at all. Every craft, whether it's poetry, pottery, painting, or indeed our efforts to innovate on our financial operations, are liable to this condition in which we get so wrapped up in the fear that our ideas can't be turned into anything or earn us a seat at the table that we refuse to try anything new if we don't know for certain that what comes out is going to be perfect. If you've ever considered picking up a new hobby, giving honest feedback to someone on your team, or championing a change in process to your stakeholders, but didn't because you worried about what would happen if it went wrong or you screwed up, you've experienced writer's block in its purest form. Writer's block is not a lack of ideas, but a fear that we can't turn our ideas into anything. And ironically, no more common is a condition like that than in a room like this, where you and your colleagues are so competent and so high achieving that you demand a level of perfection out of yourselves. And look, I understand, you in particular navigate a universe of intense regulatory scrutiny, and your ability to thrive in that environment is why you're in this room today. But unfortunately, the same standards to which you owe your success are the standards that put you at risk of never discovering all you're capable of as a leader, as an innovator, as a person. So what can we do? Well, in poetry, the best way to overcome perfectionism is by embracing the exact opposite. And so poets embrace imperfectionism. And imperfectionism is exactly what it sounds like. It's a word that I just made up. But it's also what happens when a poet stops aiming for a masterpiece when they pick up their pen and they instead learn to aim for the trash can. Poets aim for the trash can. Poets pull their most uninspiring, cliche, clunky ideas out onto the page and give those ideas just as much breathing room as their good ones. I know that sounds goofy, but here's the thing. An artist's best work is rarely planned. An artist's best work is more often discovered. And the way they discover it is by sorting through enough of their own terrible or clunky ideas and attempts that one day they happen to stumble upon the perfect, terrible idea. The one that mostly stinks right now, but that has some potential to being grown into something worth sharing with the world if you just stick with and nurture it long enough. So here's the deal.